I woke up to quiet. Not the kind of quiet that wraps around you like a soft blanket, but the kind that settles into your chest and makes itself at home. My wedding day had begun, and the house was still. No hum of voices, no movement down the hallway, no coffee brewing in the kitchen. Just me, and a silence that had followed me for years. The morning light slid across the hardwood floor, soft and golden. Outside, the garden I'd planted months ago was in full bloom, wildflowers mostly. I picked the ones that were always overlooked at the florist. The imperfect stems, the odd colors, the kinds of flowers people only noticed when everything else had wilted. I stood at the window with my coffee and looked at the arrangement I'd made the night before. Everything was set, just like I planned. I didn't expect many people from my side to show, but she promised. Mom promised. She said she'd come, said she wouldn't miss it. I checked my phone. No messages. I smiled to myself anyway, trying not to read into it. Maybe she was running late. Maybe she was getting dressed, curling her hair, putting on the perfume she always wore when she had somewhere important to be. I turned my attention to the reception space. It was simple. My kind of simple. Clean linens, pale blue accents, and magnolia napkins folded just right. I placed the one marked Mom Reserved at the seat closest to mine, folded it one extra time, Magnolia, because it was her favorite, or at least it used to be, before all this, before it felt like I had to earn my spot in her life. After the hair and makeup team left, I picked up my phone again. No missed calls, no texts. I dialed her, no answer. I left a voicemail. Hey Mom, just checking if you're on the way. No rush, just let me know you're okay. Still nothing. I called again, then again. 10 calls in, my hands started to shake. Around the 40th, the room started to spin, just a little. By the time I hit 98, I wasn't even dialing. I was just begging. My bridesmaids tried to distract me. She's probably driving, one said. Maybe her phone died, said another. I nodded, smiled, pretended that explanation made sense, but in my gut, I knew better. It wasn't just today. It was every day before it. She didn't come to the school plays, the awards ceremonies, the days I really needed her, but I still kept setting the table for her, just in case this time she'd show. I called my mom 98 times. She didn't pick up once. I said it out loud to myself. The number sounded ridiculous, pathetic even, but I didn't care. When you're hoping for your mother, you stop counting. You just keep calling. I walked out into the reception area, brushing invisible lint from my dress. The tables were filling with Daxton's side, his mom, his cousins, people I'd only met twice, but who smiled at me like they meant it. I glanced at the guest list table. My column? Nearly empty. A couple murmured behind me. I caught a whisper. Where's her family? I kept walking. Pretended I didn't hear. I was good at that. Back inside, one of my friends, Emily, approached me with her phone in hand. She looked hesitant, unsure. Hey, I think you need to see this. On the screen was my mother, Marisol, frosting a cake, laughing, her hair perfectly curled, makeup flawless, apron clean. Anything for my sweet little angel, she sang into the camera, placing fondant letters on top of a baby blue cake. It was for Seraphine, my sister, her baby shower, happening at the exact same time as my wedding. I didn't say a word, didn't scream, didn't cry. I just turned around and walked back inside. My lips pressed tight, not to stop tears, but to stop the scream climbing up my throat. She didn't forget. She chose not to come. Later, after the speeches and the first dance I barely remember, I took my seat. The chair next to me stayed empty. The napkin stayed folded. The name card stayed untouched. I looked at it, really looked, and thought, I saved her a seat, but she was too busy baking for someone else. The doors to the reception hall creaked a little when I opened them, and for a second, it felt like I was stepping into someone else's celebration. Everything was still too quiet. A few early guests were mingling near the bar, but the space looked untouched. I walked past the tables slowly, scanning the setup. Each plate was where it should be. The centerpieces were as I envisioned. The napkins, folded like magnolias, white and soft, sat neatly in every place setting. I moved to the table where she was supposed to sit. Reserved, Mom. I bent down and straightened the card, adjusted the edge of the napkin. For a second, I let myself believe that she might still walk through the door, that maybe she was just delayed. She had a way of making an entrance late so people would notice. Someone behind me said, "It's beautiful, for such a small wedding." I turned slightly, nodded, and didn't say a word. Small, yeah. Not intimate, just unfinished. I looked at her seat again. That chair wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a hope I hadn't been able to kill off yet. I left room for her, both in the hall and in my chest. Maybe, I thought, maybe she'd surprise me. Time passed. The lights dimmed a little as the sun shifted. When I returned from greeting a few of Daxton's cousins, I noticed something missing. The name card. The one that said, "Reserved, Mom." It was gone. I scanned the floor, checked under the chair, under the table. Nothing. The napkin was still there, folded perfectly, unmoved. But her name, gone. I waved over one of the staff. "Hey, do you know what happened to the name card here?" He looked uncertain, scratching the back of his neck. "Oh, I think someone called earlier. Said the guest wouldn't be able to make it and asked if we could cancel the seat. Said it wasn't needed anymore. No name. No specifics. Just a message." I stood there, holding on to the edge of that chair like it could hold me back from crumbling. She hadn't just decided not to come, she made sure no one would even ask where she was. Erased her own invitation like she never got it. She didn't just skip the wedding, she made sure no one would notice she was ever invited. The napkin stayed, untouched, unbothered. Like me, just sitting there, holding shape while something inside had already collapsed. Guests started arriving in clusters, mostly Daxton's family. I smiled, shook hands, accepted compliments I barely heard. Everyone was warm, kind. But kind doesn't patch a hole that size. I caught pieces of whispers here and there. "Is that her mom over there?" "No, I think she's not here." "None of her family?" The voices stung more because they weren't cruel. They were confused. I smiled tighter, walked faster, poured more wine than I drank. One woman, soft-spoken, maybe in her 50s, leaned in and said, "You're so strong, sweetie. I can't imagine." I nodded. That was easier than trying to explain. But inside, I thought, strength isn't some badge you earn. It's what you wear when you've got nothing left to lose. It's pretending you're whole when you're leaking from the seams. Daxton caught my eye and reached under the table, gently squeezing my hand. His touch reminded me I wasn't alone. But it didn't change the fact that the seat next to mine was still empty. And then came the moment that sealed the quiet humiliation into something heavier. A middle-aged woman, probably a +1 of someone I didn't even know, walked right up to me as I was standing near the drink station. "Excuse me," she said, holding up her glass. "Could we get more water at table 6? I blinked. She hesitated. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were with the staff." She walked away with a little laugh and a mumbled apology. I didn't stop her. I didn't correct her. She saw someone standing alone, no veil, no crown, no people surrounding me, and assumed I was working. And honestly, I didn't look like I belonged. Not to her, maybe not to anyone. I slipped into the restroom and stared at myself in the mirror. No one would have guessed I was the bride. By the time the speeches started, I'd stopped listening. I sat at my table, watching everyone laugh and toast and pass plates like nothing was missing. But something was. The room was full, and I'd never felt emptier. Her chair, still there, the napkin, still folded. She didn't just stay away, she made sure I'd feel it. They say weddings are about who shows up, but sometimes it's about who doesn't, and who makes sure you feel it. I stepped out the side door just after the sun dipped low enough to paint the sky a dull peach. The voices inside the reception hall faded with every step I took toward the riverbank. My heels dug slightly into the grass, but I didn't care. I needed to breathe somewhere that didn't echo with small talk and questions I didn't want to answer. I sat on the edge of the low stone wall near the water, elbows on knees, eyes scanning the ripples. My dress wrinkled beneath me, but I let it. It wasn't the dress I'd dreamed of, it wasn't the day I thought I'd have, and I wasn't the bride anyone was really here for. Bits of the past started knocking again, like they always did when the present got too loud. The birthday where there was no cake because Mom had to finish cupcakes for Seraphine's baby shower. The high school graduation where the family banner had my name misspelled and no one fixed it. The Christmas she left early to help Seraphine settle the baby, even though I'd driven 8 hours to be there. For a long time, I told myself those were just mistakes, misunderstandings. She's busy, she's trying, she loves differently. But love that forgets you too often starts looking like neglect. And when that neglect shows up on milestones, you stop calling it unintentional. When someone chooses not to show up once, it's forgivable. When they make a habit of it, it's a message. Daxton sat beside me without saying anything. I didn't hear him walk up, but I felt the weight of someone willing to be near me without needing words. He leaned into his knees, like me, and stared out at the water. I was in the ER sophomore year, I said, out of nowhere. Fainting spells. I called her. She was at Seraphine's kids' ballet recital. Said she couldn't leave. I had to take a cab home. He didn't flinch, didn't frown or shake his head. Just reached over and placed his hand gently on mine. Maybe I wasn't the easy one, I muttered, but I was still hers. Some people only love the version of family they can control, he said, quiet but firm. I nodded. I'd spent so long justifying her absence, I'd forgotten what presence felt like. Maybe it was never about me being difficult. Maybe it was just easier for her to pour love into someone who always played by her script. The music from the reception drifted out with the breeze, mixing with clinks of glass and bursts of laughter. Daxton kissed the back of my hand, stood up, and headed back inside. I watched him go. He didn't ask me to follow. He never does. I stayed a little longer. That's when Kylan came up. 19, sweet, a little awkward. Daxton's youngest sister. She clutched her clutch like it was a shield. Hi, she said, almost breathless. Can I sit? I nodded. She plopped down beside me, smoothing her skirt nervously. You look really pretty, she said. I smiled. Thank you. She hesitated. Sorry if this is rude, but are you adopted? That stopped me. Your mom's not here, and no one really mentioned you much when we were planning the wedding. I honestly thought, maybe you were, not close? I let out a short breath through my nose. Not quite a laugh. No, I said. I'm very much hers. Just not proudly. She looked horrified. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... It's okay, I said. And it was. Because that kind of honesty only comes from people who haven't learned how to lie yet. It wasn't malicious. It was just what it looked like from the outside. When someone's absence is loud enough, even strangers start asking questions you spent a lifetime ignoring. Kylan offered a timid smile and walked back toward the reception. I sat still. Everything inside felt colder now. The air hadn't changed, but the atmosphere did. The laughter felt rehearsed. The clinking glass, sharp, the toasts, empty. I walked back into the hall, but it was like entering a theater after the show ended. I wasn't part of the scene anymore. I was audience to my own life. My eyes landed on the magnolia napkin again, folded just right, still pristine. A joke now, a soft symbol for a role no one wanted to play. I pulled my purse from the back of my chair, slipped it open, and took out the folded card I wrote the night before. A letter for Mom. I had planned to give it to her before the ceremony. A letter of thanks, of forgiveness, of hope. But she hadn't shown. And now, those words felt wasted. I didn't rip it, didn't even open it. I folded it tighter and whispered under my breath, "You don't get this version of me anymore." Then I slid the card beneath the magnolia napkin on the empty chair beside mine. I had saved my best words for someone who had already decided they wouldn't listen. Dessert had always been her thing. Cookies for birthdays, layered cakes for holidays, and pies no one asked for, but always ended up finishing. That's why I didn't order a wedding cake. I told the planner I wanted pastries instead. Mini ones, bite-sized. Nothing that would remind me of the kind of effort she'd only ever given to someone else. The tray passed from hand to hand around the room, sugar dust trailing behind it like a poor substitute for celebration. Someone asked, "No cake?" And I smiled as if it were intentional. "We didn't want anything too traditional," I said. "It's more us this way." That wasn't true. I waited until the last week, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd show up with one, or at least ask if I wanted her to. She didn't. A server passing by complimented the napkins again. "These folds are beautiful. Magnolia, right?" I nodded, gripping my glass. I had spent the night before wedding day folding each one, breathing in and out between creases, hoping the act of making them perfect would make me forget what wasn't. Later, someone showed me her post. It was a photo of a cake. 3 tiers, hand-piped flowers, fondant details. She stood behind it, laughing, holding a spatula like it was a trophy. "Because real love deserves real frosting," the caption read. It wasn't for me. It never had been. A small hand tugged at my skirt just as I was putting my glass down. Aurelia, Seraphine's daughter, my niece. "Dee Dee," she chirped, "I made you something." I crouched to her level and took the crayon drawing with a soft smile. It showed 4 stick figures: Mom, Dad, Grandma, and her. A sun with a smiley face in the corner. Grass. A house. No me. "Where's Dee Dee?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Grandma said not to talk about you today. You were being too emotional." I nodded. What else could I do? That kind of comment doesn't come from children. It gets planted, quietly, intentionally, with smiles and cookies. I hugged her anyway. Even innocence doesn't shield you from inherited bias. Midway through the reception, a gift arrived, wrapped in soft gold paper with a tag that read, "From Mom, always proud of you." The crowd leaned in, hopeful. Maybe this was the moment she redeemed herself. Maybe not with presents, but a gesture. Something. Inside was a vintage bracelet, the same one I had saved on Etsy but never bought. I said thank you out loud, just to be polite. Later that night, I checked my banking app out of habit. A fraud alert had flagged a recent charge. Same bracelet, same vendor, same card. An old emergency line my mom had access to from when I was in college and thought we'd be closer if she could help with bills. She'd used my account to buy the gift. She sent me a present and billed me for it. Just like her love, always under my name, but never really mine. The whispers started not long after. "She's strong," someone said behind a napkin. "She's alone," another added. "She deserves better." But there was a shift. It wasn't pity anymore. It was discomfort. People didn't know where to place their sadness, so they folded it into sympathy and served it back like a cold plate of polite concern. One couple at the bar exchanged a look and murmured, "I hope she doesn't take it personally." I did. That's what made it real. I left the hall and walked along the side of the building toward a window that caught my reflection. There I was, hair pinned up, dress clinging softly to my sides, smile gone. A bride, technically, but all I saw was the woman people glance at and wonder, what happened to her? Maybe some people are born to be the centerpiece. Others? The cautionary tale whispered about at dessert. I pulled out my phone and dialed voicemail one more time. Maybe she had called. Maybe she had said something. Anything. There was nothing. No apology. No acknowledgement. I whispered, "You baked for her, but I gave you my heart, and you sent me the receipt." As I lowered the phone, it buzzed. A new alert. Not from her. Not a text. Not a call. A charge. A notification that something else had cleared through the account she still had access to. Even on my wedding day, she still found a way to take more than she gave. By the time the music started to fade into softer tracks and the kids began chasing each other near the fire pit, I had slipped away from the tables and sat down on a bench by the edge of the courtyard. The fairy lights strung overhead flickered gently with the breeze, but I barely noticed. The noise behind me, the clinking glasses, the polite laughter, the forced congratulations, all melted into a dull hum. I watched the people who showed up, the ones I barely knew. Most of them were from Daxton's side, all smiles and effort, kind strangers. But still strangers. They danced, they toasted, they called it a beautiful wedding. And it was, if you looked at it the way a realtor looks at a house, surface shine. What I couldn't ignore was who wasn't there, who should have been. I started reciting the excuses again, the ones I'd used to protect her over the years. She's tired. It was last minute. She meant well. That last one got used the most. At some point, I realized I'd become her best defense attorney, shielding her even when she wouldn't so much as show up to the trial. You can only lie for someone so many times before the lies start tasting like ash. My phone buzzed. A call. I didn't recognize the number at first, but then it clicked. Aunt Rhoda. She rarely called me directly. I answered with a twinge of hope. Maybe this would be different. Maybe she'd ask how the day went. Maybe she'd even say she was sorry. "Hey, hun," she said casually. "Do you still have that navy blue dress you wore to your graduation? I think it'd look good on my daughter for her banquet." That was it. No mention of the wedding. No, "How are you?" No, "We missed you." Nothing. I responded as politely as I could manage, told her I'd have to check, hung up a few sentences later. I wasn't a bride. I was a closet to borrow from. And that, somehow, cut deeper than the empty seat at the reception. I sat there a while longer, letting the last bit of daylight cling to the edge of the sky before it gave up completely. That's when I heard footsteps. Soft, but familiar. Mrs. Trent. My old English teacher from high school. She was smaller than I remembered, but her presence filled the bench beside me the way only certain people can, without trying. She didn't say anything at first, just wrapped her arms around me and held me. "You've always been the kind of daughter a woman should be proud of," she said, "even if not all women know how to say it." I don't know why that undid me the way it did, but I sank into her hug like it was the only real thing I'd touched all day. We sat together quietly before I said, "I still feel like that 16-year-old waiting in the hallway with my essay, hoping she'd be proud of something I made." Mrs. Trent smiled softly. "You remember the one you wrote about choosing your own family?" I nodded. "You've done just that. She didn't mean just Daxton. She meant every hard step I'd taken to build a life outside of the spotlight I was never invited into." I didn't cry. I didn't have the energy for it. But something shifted. Something settled. Later, I stood just outside the dance floor, watching Daxton's mother twirl with her grandson, people laughing around her without a care. My phone buzzed again. Another photo from the baby shower. This time, Seraphine cutting a cake with Mom's hand over hers on the knife. Still no message from her. I remembered what Mrs. Trent had told me in my senior year, when I was dealing with the fallout of a failed college application and a mother who hadn't even asked if I was okay. Sometimes silence is a full sentence, and sometimes it's a door slamming shut. Tonight, it was both. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. Not to write her, but to write me. "You showed up," I typed. "You stood in your dress, folded the napkins, greeted strangers, smiled through the questions. You were present." I saved it. Didn't send it. The reception started winding down. I walked over to the guest book, barely signed, sitting lonely near the gift table. I picked up a pen, flipped to the first blank page, and wrote under the name, "Bride." She didn't show up, but I did, and that's enough. As I closed the book, I heard a voice behind me. A distant cousin, I think. She wasn't being cruel, just honest. "Your mom really missed out." I didn't turn around, didn't argue. I just whispered, "No." She chose exactly what she wanted. The house was still, the kind of still that makes you question if the walls are listening. I hadn't touched my wedding dress since I hung it by the door last night. It swayed slightly, caught in the current from the ceiling fan. I hadn't had the energy to put it away. I sat on the couch with a throw blanket around my shoulders, not for warmth, just for the weight. My phone lit up with a handful of messages from Daxton's relatives. Kind people. Kind words. Beautiful bride. So happy for you both. Wishing you a lifetime of joy. I tapped a few hearts, typed thank you once, then nothing. Still no call from her, no text. No, sorry I missed it, or even congrats. It's funny how silence can feel heavier after the party. You think once the lights go out and the music stops, the absence will too. But this one stays. It doesn't fade. It settles into the rug fibers and hangs in the air above the empty cake box on the counter. I almost messaged her. I really did. Typed out. Did something happen? Then deleted it. If love needs a reminder, it was never offered freely. Midnight came without fanfare. I reached for my laptop, not sure why. Habit, I guess. Something to do with my hands. My inbox had 6 new messages. 5 were junk. 1 was from her. Subject line, about the wedding. I froze. Maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe she regretted not coming. Maybe this was the moment I'd been holding out for. I clicked. And then I saw it. The thread wasn't meant for me. It was forwarded. But she must have hit the wrong contact, clicked Juniper instead of Seraphine. I read it twice to be sure. Good thing I didn't go. That whole thing would have been awkward. Glad we stuck with the shower. Below that, she always did like doing things her own way. Let her. There was no apology, no remorse, not even curiosity. My hand trembled slightly on the trackpad, but I didn't cry. Something inside me, too exhausted to react, just sat still. Even her misfires have perfect aim. I shut the laptop but didn't close it, just let it rest against the cushion beside me. I stared at the ceiling like I was waiting for it to answer a question I hadn't asked out loud. Then the phone buzzed, a message from her. You made a beautiful bride. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. I stared at it. For a moment, I considered the possibility. Maybe this was her trying. Maybe she saw the photos and realized. Maybe she… Buzz. Another message. Oh dear. That message was for Seraphine. Sorry, love. Sending hugs anyway. There it was. The nail. Not in the coffin. No. That would imply something had been alive. This was the nail in the imaginary door I kept hoping would open. Sometimes it's not what people forget to say. It's what they don't bother to unsay. I put the phone down and stood up. No ceremony in the movement. No drama. Just the quiet kind of tired that feels older than your body. In the hallway, the dress still hung there. I didn't touch it. Instead, I walked over to the table and picked up the framed photo someone had printed from the wedding. Me sitting next to the empty, mom-reserved chair. Magnolia napkin still folded, still untouched. I uploaded the photo to a private folder on my laptop, called it What I Let Go. Then I opened the email again, deleted it, opened the message thread, deleted that too. Not in anger, just clarity. She saw me, and still chose not to show up. That's all the truth I'll ever need. Daxton came in from the back porch. He saw me standing there, laptop open, eyes dry. He didn't ask, just walked up behind me and wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders. We stood there for a while, saying nothing. Eventually, I walked into the kitchen, opened the pantry, pulled out the cocoa powder, eggs, butter. I baked, not because I needed something sweet, but because it was the only thing I could control in that moment. A small chocolate cake, dense, honest. I cut one slice, placed it in a small white box, wrote on the lid with a Sharpie. For you, just in case you ever remember. I didn't seal it. I didn't walk it to the mailbox. I just placed it in the freezer and closed the door. They say love is patient. I think sometimes it's just tired of yelling. 2 days after the wedding, I sat at the dining table still cluttered with unopened cards and half-drunk champagne flutes. My fingers brushed past the edge of a guest photo someone had slid into a card. I picked it up, and there it was, me in my wedding dress, sitting beside the empty chair that had Mom reserved on it just hours before. The magnolia napkin folded neatly, still untouched, still waiting. I adjusted the lighting on my phone, bumped up the contrast, and cropped it just enough to make the space beside me feel intentional. Then I posted it. No caption, just a magnolia emoji. I put my phone face down and left the room. Words could be debated, twisted, questioned. But that kind of silence, the kind you could see, That didn't need explaining. By the time I'd taken the last dish out of the sink and wiped my hands dry, the post had already exploded. The comments read like confessions from strangers who had been waiting to say something about their own stories. Wait, where was your mom? She missed your wedding? Are you serious? Some were tagged, some replied with disbelief, some wrote, "Been there." Others said, "This makes me so angry for you." I didn't write back. I didn't like any of them. I just read, Daxton walked in halfway through. He glanced at my phone on the table, then looked at me. I didn't say anything. He didn't ask. He knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about letting the truth speak for itself. I sat back and watched the thread unravel. Not just my story, but others. Comments from people who'd felt left behind, forgotten, erased. It wasn't just about her anymore. It never was. The next morning, I took a walk to my regular cafe downtown. I needed a coffee I didn't make myself. Something warm I hadn't poured with shaking hands. I walked in, and the bells above the door chimed soft, like always. The barista, younger than I remembered, smiled and said, "Hey, congrats again." "You looked amazing." I nodded and moved toward the corner booth I always picked. The TV was on, local news, volume low. I wouldn't have noticed it, except I heard her voice. On screen, a segment about Southern family traditions was playing. Seraphine's baby shower filled the screen, the cake, the streamers, the guests. Then, there she was, my mother, holding a glass of sparkling cider, giving a toast with her hand on Seraphine's back. "Family means no one gets left behind," she said. "We're only as strong as we are united." I didn't drop my cup, didn't storm out. I just sat back and let it hit. A barista near the counter whispered, "Isn't that her mom?" Another one leaned in. "Wait, she skipped her daughter's wedding for a shower?" No one looked at me directly, but they didn't need to. I sipped my coffee like it didn't burn on the way down. Later that night, at home, I opened my laptop. My inbox was flooded. My DMs too. "What happened? Do you want to talk about it? Is there anything we can do?" I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I changed my profile bio to 4 words. Some absences explain themselves. Then I posted another photo. Same chair, same napkin. This time, close up, still folded, still waiting, no tag, no comment. I had given her every chance, every olive branch, every moment to step forward. And she used each one to step back. No more justifying her silence. This time, I let it be loud. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A calm voice said, "Hi, Juniper. I'm with a podcast called Heartline, focused on family healing. We'd love to have you on. Your stories become, well, a bit of a movement." I paused. "Thank you," I said. But I didn't share to be heard. I shared so someone else might recognize their own silence. I hung up, deleted the voicemail. I wasn't looking for an audience. Just a mirror big enough for her to see what she left behind. 3 days after the wedding, I came home to a package leaning neatly against my front door. The wrapping paper was pale blue, a shade too deliberate to be generic. My name was written in handwriting I knew without reading twice. No note, just Mom. Daxton carried in a box of decorations from the car while I peeled the paper back. Inside was a baby blue scarf, embroidered along the corner in thin cursive. "To the best bride. Love always." He looked at me, didn't say anything, just raised his eyebrows slightly, waiting to see how I'd react. I offered him a shrug, not too hopeful, not too cold. Maybe Grace is accepting even the smallest gestures. I picked up my phone and sent her a simple, "Thank you." Nothing came back. That night, after Daxton went to bed and the house settled, I logged into my bank account to check on a deposit for our honeymoon refund. Something caught my eye. A charge from 2 days before the wedding, same price as the scarf I'd just unwrapped. I clicked through. Same boutique, same shipping address, the account it came from, mine. It was a card I hadn't used in years, an old emergency line I'd left open for her when I still thought giving her access meant giving her trust. I called the store to be sure. The woman on the phone remembered the order, confirmed the name. Yes, Marisol. She said it was a gift, asked for same-day delivery. A gift she made me pay for. I closed the tab without saying a word, just leaned back in my chair and stared at the scarf on the table. She made me pay for the thing she gave me, and expected applause. I didn't throw it, didn't scream. I sat with the insult like it was a familiar itch I'd grown used to scratching. In the drawer of the hall closet, beneath a stack of tax folders, was a file I hadn't looked at in years. I pulled it out, set it on the kitchen counter, and opened it. Inside was a co-signed loan, Seraphine's. From when she wanted to start her momfluencer brand. When she needed someone to believe in her enough to take the risk. No repayment, no thank you, no trace of memory from either of them. My name was still on it. Toward the bottom of the last page, in small print, was a clause I'd forgotten. I had the right to terminate my co-signature with 30 days' notice. I read that line 3 times. Then I printed the form. I didn't do it out of revenge. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just clear. Sometimes closing a door doesn't require a slam, just a signature. The next morning, I drove to the bank. No traffic, no music, just me and the windows down. I walked in, handed the form to the clerk, and waited while he reviewed it. "This'll trigger a reassessment," he said. "She'll be notified." I nodded. He paused. "It might impact any business credit she's tied to." "I understand." He stamped it and slid a copy across the desk to me. I thanked him and left. Didn't call Seraphine. Didn't post about it. Didn't even mention it to Daxton. I didn't break the system. I just stopped holding it up. The sunlight outside felt warmer than it should have. I let it hit my face as I stood on the sidewalk and closed my eyes. Later that evening, I took the scarf, folded it neatly, and placed it in a small gift box. I grabbed a pen and scribbled across a sticky note. "Some gifts come with receipts. I'm sending this one back." I set it on the porch, right where the first one had been delivered. Then I went inside and opened my laptop. I added the scarf's photo to a private album I'd been keeping. Same title I'd been using since the wedding. The Things They Made Me Pay For. She bought the illusion. I canceled the subscription. 2 weeks after the wedding, the scarf was still folded on the hallway chair. The letter I never gave her stayed in its envelope, tucked into the back of the kitchen drawer beneath takeout menus and expired coupons. Nothing had changed, but everything had shifted. No messages, no apologies, not even a card. The weight of the silence was no longer crushing. It was just there, like furniture I'd stopped noticing. Some things don't need answers. They need space. I hadn't opened the wedding photo folder since I posted the image of the empty chair. I didn't need to. That story had already been told. Today, I had a different task. In the living room were boxes, my wedding shoes, table centerpieces, unopened favors, all of it carefully packed. I was taking them to a women's center downtown. They helped women who were rebuilding after being cut off, pushed out, or left behind. If the day wasn't for me, maybe it's for someone else now. At the dining table, I opened my laptop to finish the last round of thank you emails. Scrolling through the draft, I paused at one section. "Thank you to my mother for..." My fingers hovered, then I hit delete. I typed instead. "Thank you to those who showed up, physically, emotionally, wholeheartedly. No shade, no bitterness, just the truth. Gratitude isn't meant to be stretched over empty seats." Later, on my way to drop off the donation boxes at Daxton's sister's house, Kylan met me at the door. She smiled nervously and handed me a folded paper. "Aurelia wanted you to have this," she said. Inside was a crayon drawing, stick figures, Mom, Dad, Grandma, and this time, me. Aurelia's small handwriting spelled out names above each head. "Dee Dee," she wrote above mine. "She said she told Grandma she wanted to draw you this time," Kylan added. "And Grandma said okay." It was small, but it melted something I didn't know was still frozen. I folded the paper and tucked it into the same box where I had once kept my vows. Sometimes love skips a generation to find a safer landing. That afternoon, I pulled up to the nonprofit center, brick building. Nothing fancy, just a sturdy front door and a warm face behind it. The director, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a steady voice, asked, "What brings you in today?" I nodded to the boxes. "Someone else might need a start," I said. "I needed an ending." She understood without needing more. I offered to come back next week, not because I had to, because I wanted to. Letting go doesn't mean you lost. It means you freed your hands to hold something better. Before leaving, I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a single folded napkin, Magnolia. I had saved one. I placed it in a small shadow box frame I had brought with me and handed it to the director. I had written on the label, "Reserved for healing." She didn't ask what it meant. She just nodded. As I walked out the door, sunlight caught the edge of my sleeve. I turned back once, looking at the frame on the welcome desk. She never sat in that seat, but I'm still here, and I've made room for someone who will,